So a client and a good guy, hey Sam, brought in that PRS Thsinde 50 last month, and we both agreed that it was a terrible sounding amp and not the amp for him. And I watched some clips of his band playing live, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, buddy, based on what you're doing and how you play and the sounds you're going for, the two amps I would recommend beyond any others would be either a Vibrolux Reverb, if you want something smaller, or a Super Reverb. He found this 66 Super Reverb over at Carter Vintage, and he bought it. I think he did very well. It has the CTS Alnico speakers, so he brought it in for me to go through and make sure everything is perfect. The only complaint he has is he says the reverb tank feeds back. Yeah, that's not how it's supposed to be. Let's get this up on the bench and take a look at things inside. But so far, what I'm hearing is very promising. We just have some reverb oddness happening. All right, 66, 66, 66, and there's an 1130 66 stamp over by the reverb driver tube. So I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is in fact a 66. As always, I like to make sure that the choke and output transformer hardware are tight. That screw there wasn't quite as tight as it could be. Get a loose screw on the output transformer. So just the one loose screw. Let's take a look into the doghouse. Oh, real quick, it's got an Amperex rectifier tube. I don't know if it's a 5A4 or a 5U4 GB. I'll check that in a little bit. It's got some Electro-Harmonix 6L6s, and we'll check the preamp tubes in just a second. Everything's got this really nice patina on it. Didn't come with a tube shield for V4. The mixer recovery stage. I see an RCA on that one. JJ there. RCA 7025 there. JJ ECC 81 reverb driver. Recovery stage is a generic Chinese. It says Thsinde. And the phase inverter is an ARS AT7. The description on this amp said it's mostly original. The Tolex and grill cloth had been replaced. I'll check to make sure the baffle hardware is tight. But it said it had been recently serviced or professionally serviced. I don't remember the exact description. Let's see what that means. I see. Now, I have given IC brand filter caps a lot of well-deserved shit on the channel over the years, primarily by the way that they're used in fenders, modern fender reissues and hot rods. But Fender specs out the cheapest that Illinois Capacitor makes. Illinois Capacitor makes some which are actually okay. So if I see, it's not automatically a problem. However, I thought that was a splice where they'd connected the new cap to the old cap's lead. They didn't. They just have the ground wire going there for some reason. And none of these are attached with silicone. Other than that, it seems okay. I was initially concerned that that was a tacked on solder joint, just an oddly shaped original solder joint from the factory with it domed in an unusual way. They did these upside down originally, so you get those kind of even ice cream scoop domes usually. And someone at some point put in this 5-watt, very good quality Vishay 5-watt wire wound for the 1K dropper. That's overkill, but fine. This is a 1-watt, as are these. Original here would have been a 1-watt, and a 1-watt or 2-watt suffices. You don't have to go to 5 watts, but this is all probably fine as far as the circuit goes, even though mechanically it's not great. I don't know whether he's going to want me to do that better just for the sake of having it better, or whether he wants to keep it as is if it's working just fine. We'll see how the amp performs under further testing. Well, this is something I haven't seen before. Someone has put a bit of bus wire from that ground to that ground to that ground to the bias ground over there, and all that is absolutely unnecessary. And they retained the grounding lugs going to the transformer mounting hardware. All that needs to be redone properly. The ground wire here for the AC safety ground is not as long as the neutral. I can tell that without looking. I don't know how they've done the power switching yet. I'll check that. I know that they removed the depth cap, but I don't know that this is up to my spec. I'll check that in just a moment. But that's a different camera angle. Let me get that little bit of loose solder out. And another IC cap there, 100 microfarad, 100 volt. My preference is a 47 microfarad, 100 microfarad's okay. And I've seen enough of these diodes in 60s Fenders begin to fail these days that I like to change them at the same time, and I'll change out that 470 ohm dropper there at the same time, just while I'm in the area. That's not expensive, it's not difficult. And I'll certainly remove this silly bus wire. If this is solving a problem, then it's a problem that there's a better solution for, and this is like 22 gauge bus wire, floppy stuff, not up to the task anyway. The rest of it all appears to be original, including this cathode bypass caps, and that, I think, explains the reverb squeal. Let me explain. No, it's too much. Let me sum up. These original cathode bypass caps that collectors want are absolutely crap. Each one of these has two caps in there, or two halves of capacitance. This one right here is the one of interest for this problem. This right here is the reverb recovery stage, its cathode. It's got an 820 ohm resistor, 25 microfarad across it. And that is not just the cathode for the reverb recovery stage, it is also the cathode for the reverb mixer stage. So V4, the first triode, takes the signal from the reverb tank and amplifies it, and then sends it out of its plate through the reverb level pot, and then that signal is mixed back in to the second triode of V4, along with the dry, and both those signals, the reverb as it comes into V4A and the reverb as it comes into V4B, are 180 degrees out of phase with each other. And if that cathode bypass cap is not actually filtering that, you're going to have all kinds of, you guessed it, feedback leading to oscillation and squeal depending on how low the capacitance actually is. So let's test that. I've got it hooked up to my reverb tank, and I've got it here on the bench. And the tank that the amp came with is a Mojotone long decay, which is a fine tank. I prefer the medium decay, but the long decay is fine. But anyway, so here we have this cathode bypass cap. It's worse on some notes than others. So we're going to do two things here. First of all, I'm going to lift that cap out. You're going to hear what it sounds like with absolutely no capacitance. This may be really horrible. Wow, yeah, that was awful. That's what happens when you have absolutely no capacitance. And the longer this cap would fail, the closer this would get from just having feedback in the reverb to that awful sound that you just heard. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this cap lead up in the air, and I'm going to temporarily put in a new Vishay 22 microfarad in its place. So now, there's a really long decay. There's a really long reverb trail, but it sounds quite nice. And that nasty oscillation is absent from it. And at more realistic reverb levels, So that's what cathode bypass caps can do for us. And that's a great example of why this amp needs to have new ones. So I want to go through and change all the cathode bypass caps, including that one that was changed in the past, but for the incorrect one. It's got a 25, which matches the schematic. It needs to be a 5, which is what Fender actually used in production after a short period of time. It just makes the speed pot track with the knob track with the actual change. The other thing I want to do is there's a white substance on the jacks and RCA jacks, and it might be other places. Looks like there's some kind of cremlin or other alleged dielectric grease or something. Make sure it's not in the tube sockets. Make sure it's not in the pots. So I want to change out all the cathode bypass caps, give all the jacks and pots and tube sockets a good clean, fix all the stupid ground things happening down there with that bus wire. I'll confirm that the power cable's been attached properly. If it's not, I'll make it be that way. Optional things, I would like to change out all the components on the bias board, though they are fine now. I would rather just get it all perfect while I have it here. And on that note, also very optional, I don't think that the filter caps are particularly lovely, and as they have no physical security within the doghouse, I don't think it's really roadworthy. But I'm not trying to spend the guy's money for him. There are things which need to be done on this amp, and there are things which it would be good to do on this amp, and I'll answer any questions he has. One other thing I want to point out on any old Fender, right here, this solder joint where the two jacks come together. When these jacks get loose over the years, that gets stressed and cracked. This one seems okay, but it's really common for that not to be okay. And often when in the process of tightening these up, I'll see a little crack happen in there. So I will remove these jacks. I will clean the metals. I'll put them back. I'll make sure they're really tight. And if necessary, I'll reflow this solder joint right here. It's just a weak point in the entire circuit, and it gets overlooked a lot. But overall, I think the owner got a fantastic amp. I think Carter Vintage did him right. Everything is as described. There are things in here which are not perfect, but to be honest, most people, even people who work at guitar stores, would not know that, because there's been a world of, decades of articles saying this is a good thing to see in an amp. And this stuff just seems like, hey, more ground's better, right? Maybe that's one of the reasons I do this channel, is to help people know better. But I think that Carter sold an amp exactly as described, in good faith, and it is, in fact, a wonderful sounding amp. It can just be that much better, and will be soon.